Hi there. Welcome to the Imperfect Prophet podcast for women who wonder. Frankly, as we go through life, I'm sure we wonder about a great deal. First as little kids, then as adolescents, then as young women, then as transitional women. What are we calling ourselves these days? And then you get to this point in life, or my point in life, when you're postmenopausal and wondering what's next. Wondering if the parade already passed you by. Join me, Wonder Wendy. I'm going to be your host as we talk about some of these unique challenges that face women today in a new millennium, going through menopause and trying to live a rich, full life. There might even be a few men and younger women that want to listen in too. That's okay. But there's a roller coaster and we're all on it. And I'm going to be your guide to help you figure out when you should close your eyes, when you should hang on, and maybe we'll explore some ideas for what works for you if it doesn't work for me, or vice versa. So join the conversation, pick up your favorite beverage, and we'll talk to you soon. Welcome to the Imperfect Prophet. Hey there. Today we're going to talk about one of the most annoying pieces of advice ever given. Just breathe. Yeah, let's start there. Because on the surface, it sounds simple, gentle, maybe supportive. Just breathe. But depending on the moment, that can feel about as helpful as someone saying, hey, just calm down. I hope you have your beverage for this one because we're going to have to settle in for a bumpy ride. I have a nice warm cup of tea, even though it's over 100 degrees today in Phoenix. I'm still drinking hot tea because it's soothing for the system. Anyway, I don't know about you, but when someone says, just breathe or calm down, it's never worked for me. Not once. In fact, if anything, it has the exact opposite effect. Because when you're in it and your heart is racing, your thoughts are spinning, and everything in you just feels completely out of control. Just breathe doesn't land like wisdom. It lands like dismissal. It's kind of icky, isn't it? Like, oh, thank you. I hadn't thought of that. I'll just keep doing the thing that is literally keeping me alive. Have you noticed? I am breathing. Otherwise, we've got a much bigger problem. Anyone who's watched, The Pit or Grey's Anatomy or any one of those medical shows knows that not breathing, big problem. Stat, call a crash cart. And I think that's why this phrase, just breathe, hits such a nerve because it wants to be guidance, but it can feel like someone is minimizing everything you're going through. Like they're saying, oh, this isn't that big a deal. Just relax, get it together. And in that moment, it's not what I need. Probably not what you need either. Because if it were as easy as putting on my big girl panties and getting over it, I would have already done that, wouldn't I? I don't need to be dismissed. I just want to be met. And I have a feeling you've probably experienced that too. That's just being human. Whew. Now, when my children were when my children were little, I can talk. I was a voracious reader of parenting advice because I wanted all the advantage I could get because raising kids is hard. And I love those advice columns because parents will send in the strangest questions. And then the advice columnist is left to resolve it and provide you with a solution or a strategy or a better understanding. One of the letters I remember reading was from a parent who said their child would not just have tantrums, not just have protest, but they would threaten to hold their breath until they passed out. This child had gotten so good at holding its breath that the mom actually saw a kid change color. She was terrified for the health and well-being of this child. Like Is this child's brain getting enough oxygen if they're holding their breath like that? And I'm so grateful to the columnist's answer because they said as soon as the brain doesn't have enough oxygen to function, that child's going to pass out. Don't panic because as soon as that child passes out, the nervous system will catch up and it will start breathing again. Wow. Their body is so smart that it'll shut down the brain and start up the nervous system, and the kid would be breathing. It was actually comforting to me. Don't let your kids hold you hostage saying they'll hold their breath until they pass out. Yay, go ahead, pass out. Learn from that, and then learn how to be a decent human being. Breathing is automatic. The body knows what to do. And somewhere deep inside of each human being, the body understands survival. Which raises a really interesting question. If breathing is automatic, then what are people actually saying when they tell us to just breathe? To illustrate this point, I'd like to take you back to a little moment in time. Not a yoga class, the logical expectation given how much yoga I do. Not a meditation retreat, I've done a few of those too, but a delivery room. When I was in labor with Becca, yes, the same Becca who is now 30 years old, and somehow, despite those 30 years having have passed, that memory is still really crystal clear. And if you've already given birth, you may know where this story is going. And if you haven't, please stay with me anyway, because I think it will make sense. In preparing for Becca's birth, we'd signed up for those weekly classes. I don't even remember how many weeks they went on. It felt like you were there every Tuesday night for months. But given that pregnancy is only 9 months and the first couple you don't know you're pregnant, it must have only been 2 or 3 months. I don't know. Anyway, we took Lamaze classes, the ones that are supposed to prepare you for childbirth. And Becca's dad attended as many classes as his Army schedule would allow. But unfortunately, he missed the class where they covered something called back labor. And yes, that is very much a real thing. Apparently some babies get turned around, not breech, but they're facing the wrong way. And they want to enter the world while simultaneously wrecking your tailbone. The thing that happens is because they're in that facing the wrong way position, they're pushing differently on the spinal cord. And that creates very different contractions, and it's a different kind of pain. And if he'd been in that class, he would have discovered that there are some great techniques to relieve that specific kind of pressure. But he didn't learn those. And because I was shuddering in profound pain during the contractions, I was not as able to converse as I am right now with you. As a matter of fact, I might have been damn near monosyllabic. Now, the one thing he did take out of those Lamaze classes is that you can breathe through the pain, which, to be fair, is a real part of Lamaze method. Breathing through whatever's going on. But remember, he's in the Army. And his interpretation of that lesson was to look me dead in the eye and take on his best command voice and say, "It." Now I remember thinking, or at least the version of thinking that's possible while attempting to expel an awkwardly shaped 8-pound bowling ball from your body. Are you kidding me right now? Like, sir, This is your contribution to the situation. Really? Really? And I had nothing left to deal with him. Nothing. 20 years later, I finally came up with the perfect response that the older, wiser me would have done in that situation. I would have folded him in half with a well-placed hit and yelled, "Just breathe through it," as he clutched the family jewels. Yeah, I'm still bitter. What can I say? Some things don't quite go away. But in that moment, breathing didn't feel optional. Of course I was breathing. Pain was there, whether I liked it or not. The intensity was there. That experience was unfolding, and it was traumatic. Amazing in the end, but traumatic. 6 years later, when I was in labor with Arisha, I had remarried, and her dad approached it so much differently. No command voice, no instructions being barked at me from the sidelines. Instead, he looked me straight in the eye. And he modeled exactly what I needed to be doing. One big inhale, one big outhale. Outhale? Exhale. That's the word. No lecture, no fixing, no words, just presence. And I stared into his eyes and matched his breathing. And it calmed me down. At that moment, I didn't understand fully what he'd done. But the contrast, in retrospect, taught me so much. Breathing doesn't remove the pain. It doesn't magically make labor easy. But it did something else. It gave me a way to be present in the moment without being taken out by it, without having everything subsumed by pain. I had that clarity, that light, that moment in deep breathing. And in relaxing a little bit, well, it did ease the pain a little bit. It allowed me to focus on one part, on that next push, on the delivery. Boy, is that different. Really, really different. There are a lot of moments in life when you can't escape what's happening. The goal is to stay present while you get through whatever it is you have to get through. And suddenly, just breathe starts to mean something different. Now, I've seen this in practice in other places. I used to use treadmills a lot. I haven't been on a treadmill in quite some time, but I'm going to assume they're still largely engineered the same way. But they have those handlebars at the top that you hang on to so you don't go flying off the back end if you're lacking coordination like me. I don't know how people run on those things, but whatever, that's another story. But if you put your hand on those handlebars, many times, that's actually a heart rate monitor. And when your hand is sitting there, you can see what your heart rate is on that screen in front of you that has all the statistics, most of which I don't understand. And we'll just leave it at that. But your hand are on there and you can feel the handlebar. Well, I learned something really interesting messing around with those handlebars. If you slow your breathing and calm your mind, you can see the heart rate drop. So slowing your breathing, calming your mind, letting your arms relax just a little bit, while still keeping your legs going at the same pace. Don't even change your pace. But it's about changing all of this above and watching that heart rate drop. And then conversely, you can go, take a deep breath, tense it up, squish it up, and keep your hand on those handlebars and watch that heart rate go up. It's essentially a biofeedback machine. You can Mess with your heart rate, with your focus and breathing. And I strongly encourage you to do that if the opportunity presents itself. Not just because it's good exercise, but it's really great to understand that you could influence how your body is operating. I mean, how powerful is that? Your body is not just happening to you. You can participate in your own rhythms, your own regulation. There are other examples of that. See, I just got really excited sharing these stories. I've read about snipers. You know, not a pleasant topic necessarily unless you need someone taken out. Again, I digress. A sniper is somebody who takes a long-range weapon and shoots at an object very, very far away. The tolerance for error when they are doing that shot is microscopic. If they shake or take a deep breath or their heart is beating really fast, it can blow the shot. It is one of the highest pressure situations imaginable. Elite performers can't ignore their breath. Same happens with Olympians, all sorts of people. They're mastering their air intake. They're mastering their heart rate. They can control that. If they can do that, what can you do? Just a thought. And then last week, I understood this lesson in an entirely different way. I finally sang in public again. No, not the national anthem that I was talking about a couple weeks ago. I'm training towards that. But my teacher thought it would be really good if I worked on another song and got comfortable singing in public again. Now, I sang a beautiful song titled No One Is Alone from Into the Woods. And listen, I love that song. That's part of the reason I picked it. It's got these great lyrics about not being alone and someone's there and you learn the lessons you learn growing up and you take them with you. Even they're not there, they're still with you. Beautiful message, beautiful music. But what I forgot when I selected is that Stephen Sondheim apparently enjoys emotionally tormenting singers. I've heard that from other singers. Not only is the song challenging, the range is challenging, the tempo is not as regular and predictable as I would like it to be. And as that recital got closer, I was spiraling. Completely spiraling. I have to share with you, bucket listers, please appreciate that even the imperfect prophet occasionally forgets her own advice. I became so genuinely afraid that I couldn't do it. So afraid that I invited no one from my inner circle to come hear me sing. It wasn't nervous. It was, oh my God, I'm going to suck. This is going to be awful. Why am I doing this? I should quit. It just, whoo, like I said, spiraling. That's what spiraling is. So I invited nobody because if I failed, I wanted fewer witnesses. I could be in a room of strangers, I guess, if I had to. Whew. The morning of the recital, I was texting a friend who lives far enough away that I knew she couldn't make it to the recital. And I told her about my spiral. And she's the one who coordinated the Wen stories in Nashville last month. And a couple of the people had stage fright, and she'd taught them centering breathing. And I was there for it, and I participated in the exercise. It's really simple. You slow your breath down intentionally, in through the nose, and a longer, slower exhale until your lungs are empty and your body relaxes. One hand on the heart, maybe the other one on the stomach. So you can feel the physiological changes as the breathing slowly calms down your system. Oh, so I did exactly what she'd suggested. I let my body tense up with the inhale and relax with the long, slow exhale. Whew. And I felt my body ease, almost like a creaking ship, loosening up. And my heart rate began to drop. And my shoulders softened. And weirdly, I suddenly felt more room in my lungs. I was getting more air, better air, more space. And then I ran through the song one more time. And something delightfully unexpected happened. Those high notes that had felt impossible just a few minutes before, suddenly I was up there and it was easy. The song hadn't changed. I was still the same person, basically, that I'd been 5 minutes before, but the panic had stopped restricting my airflow and making me nervous. And that tension was taking away from my power. Maybe that's the real lesson here. Breathing isn't just survival. When used properly, when taken beyond survival, access to presence is granted. You feel better in the moment. You feel steadier in the moment. Your body is open to more challenges. There's a version of yourself that emerges because the panic isn't drowning it out. There's another lesson I learned from that recital. And even though it has nothing to do with breathing, I think it's an important one to share here. I am guilty of being too brave sometimes. And people don't realize I need help, that I can't do it alone. And I start to believe I have to do it alone. And I'd forgotten that when I started to spiral. You know, the other performers in that recital, they were basically under the age of 16. And so I was in a room with children and parents. They were so incredibly kind and supportive. As I sang, I looked into their eyes and heads nodded and they smiled. So I was supported by strangers in that moment. But boy, do I regret not having my own people there. Not because I needed them to rescue me, but because there's something powerful about being witnessed by people who love you. I cried as I drove home because I'd been alone. Not truly alone, those other strangers were lovely. But there are no pictures from that performance, no video, no one in my inner circle to say, "You did it, here's some flowers." And I should have trusted my friends and my family enough to know that even if I tanked, even if I couldn't hit the high notes, even if I missed a few words and I came in at the wrong time, they would be proud of me for continuing to work on my voice and get stronger and better. So I took as much strength as I could from those strangers, those other people in the room. And that's a bit like life too. Don't try to be so strong that you forget to ask for help. Don't become so self-sufficient that you become isolated. Because we do need other people around us, and other people want to love and support us. And when I shared with a friend the emotions I'd felt being alone and the sadness I'd felt, she cried with me. And it was like she'd been in that room with me retrospectively, I guess. It helped a lot. So hold your friends close. You don't have to do it alone. Okay, enough dwelling on that sadness. I got through it. I did a pretty good job. And I learned a whole lot about myself. And maybe you've learned something too. In the opening of every episode of The Imperfect Prophet, I say there's a roller coaster and we are all on it. And I'm going to be your guide to help you figure out when you should close your eyes and when you should hang on. And part of the reason I use that story about roller coasters, and it remains in the opening 90 episodes into this podcast, there's always that moment after the click, 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 click up the hill where you suddenly think, oh my God, we have to go back down again. I want off. But by then it's too late. You are strapped in. The ride is moving. There is no safe way to exit. You're not getting off this thing until it gets to the end. And that's when you have to breathe. Not because it stops the ride, not because it stops the thrill, but because it helps you stay present while you move through it. And there is a difference between breathing automatically and using your breath intentionally. And listen, I'm very grateful that breathing is automatic. After all, and I made notes about this, a healthy adult at rest takes somewhere between 12 and 20 breaths a minute, which means if you do the math, you can do the math. The average 60-year-old woman like me is probably taking somewhere around 20 to 25,000 breaths a day. 20 to 25,000 breaths a day. Now, most of them are completely unnoticed. And thank goodness, because I already have a lot to think about. But every once in a while, one or two intentional breaths can change the entire trajectory of a moment. Because the magic happens when you realize your breath is so much more than survival. It's a tool, an anchor, a way to steady yourself in moments that might otherwise sweep you away, overwhelm you. Let's think about some of those high stakes moments, the hard conversations, because I don't know about you, it's very difficult to have a productive conversation when my heart is racing and my breathing is shallow. How about big decisions? Because honestly, if I had calmed down earlier, I probably would have invited some of my inner circle to that recital. Someone to clap if I did well, or love me if I struggled. How about standing on a stage before we feel ready? And that can be a literal stage, like me performing last week, or a metaphorical stage when it feels like all eyes are on you in the family. And you're responsible for that moment. The car broke down by the side of the road and the kids are hungry and you're not going to make it to the hotel where you have a reservation tonight. But you stay present with one long, deep, centering breath. So you can make better choices. So you can get through this because, well, that's when you're on the roller coaster, right? How about those moments when we react in anger? When maybe if instead of snapping, you'd taken one long, intentional breath, would that have changed the outcome? the moment when we quit something meaningful, not because we truly wanted to quit, but because we spiraled ourselves into believing we couldn't do it. I came pretty close, but that one deep centering breath changed my day. So maybe just breathe is bad advice, because there is nothing just about it. Breath is powerful. Breath changes things. Breath can steady your nervous system and make more things possible. It slows your heart rate, and it helps you stay present when panic is trying to pull you out of the moment. So maybe instead of throwing the phrase at someone from across the room, just breathe, we should look them in the eye and offer them our own slow, steady, centering breath. Inhale, exhale. Presence instead of pressure. Connection instead of dismissal. Because what well-intentioned people are trying to say is come back to yourself. Use your breath. Let it anchor you inside the moment instead of abandoning yourself into the spiral. Breathing, in this case, isn't about staying alive. It's about staying present when everything in you wants to leave. Living a wonderful bucket list life is not waiting until you feel fearless. It's not waiting until you've perfected everything and are perfectly ready. It's learning how to stay present long enough to do brave things anyway. One intentional breath at a time. I am so grateful for the opportunity to share these downloads from the universe with you in this podcast. And the truth is, I'm still learning too. Together, we are learning. Together, we are figuring out how to move through this roller coaster of a life with a little more presence, a little more courage, and maybe even a little more grace. One intentional breath at a time. One brave moment at a time. One human connection at a time. And don't forget the basics. Stay hydrated. Share this episode with a friend who might need it. And maybe the next time someone is struggling, don't tell them just breathe. Sit beside them. Breathe with them. I'll talk to you next week. But until then, take a deep breath. An even longer exhale. And give yourself permission to stay present through the ride. Welcome to the wonderful bucket list life. Like what you heard here today? Then we should be friends. I suggest you join my Facebook group. It's a good way to connect. We can have a conversation, ask me questions, whatever you want to do. It is called the Wonderful Bucket List Life. That's wonder-full bucket list life. Be a bucket lister and join me on this adventure. Or you can go to my webpage, which is Wonder Wendy and Friends, join the mailing list, learn about the book I wrote, adventures that are coming up in the future, and other podcasts. I look forward to talking to you soon, and stay hydrated. Have a great day.